been thinking this month, how shall I start this new year? Some albums have come out which I nearly did videos for, and I cut my lip, and alas, I will be talking about them in my end of the month video. Didn't really want to repeat last year and do a video for the new Poison the Well music video, so I've decided my first video back will be this. So that's me back. Yay! So as you can see by the title, I keep noticing that Zoomers and maybe some millennials keep making this mistake, and I'm here to sort it all out. What is it, Warner Child? What are we doing wrong? I hear you all say. Basically, I keep seeing this thing happen on review websites where they keep comparing albums to other albums that came out in the future. And I'm here to say that is impossible to do. And I guess it's kind of a byproduct of Zoomers not realising that they own the time machine now, and I'm going to explain it using Deftones' debut album, Adrenaline. Sure, I'm generous. I'll chuck a TLDR for those scrambled TikTok brains. No other album had come out by Deftones when this album was released in 1995. Nothing else existed. Okay, thanks for watching. Have they gone? Right. You just can't compare Kendrick Lamar's Section 80 to GNX. You sound frankly stupid when you do. I will also ignore for your benefit the small fact that in the 90s, being able to deep dive an artist was a lot harder and more expensive before streaming and iPods and YouTubes. No one was really on the internet before 1994 except Muggins here, and I got on in 95 and I was one of the early ones in the area, and I was a Neanderthal native in the caves of AOL chat rooms. Magazines or MTV were our only source of music information back then, and using the context of my lived experience of being a kid from the 80s, born in 79, who had my mind absolutely blown away when I heard this album at the start of 96 when I was 17, and then saw them in 1997 when I was 18. I was the target day one audience for this. Me and my friends formed a new metal band and got signed because of it in the third wave of the genre in the millennium. And like I say, this can be done for a lot of good debut albums, but as you can see, I was a direct eyewitness here, which is useful data for a video like this. And this seems to be 2025's album with its 30th anniversary, so it's perfect timing, what with their successful new album Private Music getting high on a lot of end-of-year lists. Okay, so if we ignore the underground of the 80s for now, like Bad Brains or Fugazi, let's just brush them under the carpet for now, and let's focus on the commercial 80s popular rock music on the radio or MTV that the people of my generation were mostly exposed to, like your spandex hair metal, your Guns N' Roses, your Def Leppards, your Bon Jovis, and your White Snakes. As MTV grew in strength, as more houses got satellite dishes on their rooftops, with it came shows like Headbangers Ball, and fueled by the Hairspray and rise of Metallica, etc. Then bang! Happy New Year and happy final decade of the 20th century that brought us cars and planes that completely changed the planet. The 90s was here and things were about to explode. Those bohemian 60s kids raised on the Beatles, who then rebelled in their teens with the Sex Pistols and Black Flag, were starting to form bands now, and with it a wave of change for the 21st century. On one side you had acid house raves or arty trip hop or jangly shoegazy indie, where college radio changed the tide and MTV rolled their eyes and exposed a lot of people to a lot of different music, as they were the ones carrying the keys to the vault. Enter 1991 with, of course, Nirvana's Nevermind. Due to it being released so late in the year, though, you should say 92 really, for it to have completely infected every teenager's brain and made us all grow our hair and get flannel shirts. And I was an MJ kid of the 80s, and I'd heard some Metallica and Sepultura and Guns N' Roses, but when I saw Teen Spirit on MTV with its video of fans moshing in slow motion, it absolutely changed me, and I felt like I'd found my people. So one example you can do now is pause this video. Oh, do you know you could do that? Yeah, you can pause YouTube videos, open up a separate tab, then watch the Teen Spirit video, and then go and watch the 7 Words video by Deftones right after it. And that'll be your first example of what's changing, and then come back here. The reason I use Nirvana is Grohl, a guy you may have heard of as the singer of Foo Fighters, also happened to be the drummer of Nirvana. In 1993, Grohl, in various interviews, famously worshipped Sepultura. But who did Max Cavalera of Sepultura worship in 1996? That's right, you've guessed it, Deftones. He wore their shirt in the Roots Bloody Roots video, the biggest song and video Sepultura have ever released. That's the context you Zoomers are missing and really need. When you say this album isn't as good as White Pony or Diamond Eyes, you need this fact right here ingrained in your brain. So here it is. So I shall repeat. The drummer of the biggest band on the planet, Nirvana, worshipped a band that was considered the heaviest band on planet Earth, Sepultura, who in turn worshipped Adrenaline by Deftones. Seriously, pause and let that sink in. And you can bet Deftones were fans of Nirvana. They're mostly more associated with their love of pumpkins, but I'm sure you can see my point about Generation X, even though, for the record, I'm a Xennial. I'm sandwiched right between them both tech-wise. If this album wasn't a success and worshipped by idiots like me, they may never have made Around the Fur or White Pony. They would have either split up financially or been dropped by the label, or they would have gone into the studio with less confidence than they did to make Lotion and Be Quiet and Drive. Now, I feel that's the end and crux of my argument, so I'll leave it there for now to stew on, because I'd like to see your comments on it. But if you want, I can also add, in 1992, Rage Against the Machine released their debut album in November, so again, technically you could say 1993. Steph has commented on his love of Rage in interviews, and Helmet's Meantime came out in 1992. Deftones covered a Helmet song. Helmet influenced every original nu metal band. If you look at Deftones on TV that year in 1992 and compare them to the band that played that HMV in 1996, it's night and day, the confidence and growth. Doesn't stop there, mate. In 1993, Smashing Pumpkins released Siamese Dream, which was fueled by Billy's jealousy of wanting to make a better album than Kurt had, a desire he lost after Kurt died. Again, just showing you how this is all connected to these sex tape lovers of the Pumpkins. 93 is also when Sepultura released their album Chaos AD. It blew Dave Grohl's mind, and Nirvana's final music really started to get heavy if you listen to their song Ivy League, which may have gone on the You Know You're Right album. I know I'm right. A few years later, Max would be getting on his knees begging to be on the next Deftones album Around the Fair with the song Head Up. Also in 93, as a side note, Tool released Undertow. Maynard, who did guest vocals with Rage Against the Machine on their album, would later help Deftones write White Pony, the album everyone worships. Then came the first album to be called nu metal, 1994's Korn, the Girl on a Swing debut self-titled album. A cocktail band born out of their love of Sepultura's Chaos AD. Are you guessing it yet? And Helmet and Depeche Mode. Guess who else loves Depeche Mode? We'll leave Primus out of this and their influence on Incubus and them doing Be Quiet and Drive with Adam Sandler, etc. Speaking of Helmet, they released their Betty album in 1994. Listen to that, then listen to Adrenaline. During 94, whilst this was all going on, I was personally getting over my grief of losing Kurt, having cried to Unplugged every night. I then went on to Green Day's Dookie, an album that would never have got the platform it got without Nirvana's Nevermind, and led to me and my friends forming our first band. Also want to mention Weezer's Blue album. The internet rightfully loves this album, and I wanted to mention it because Deftones covered Say It Ain't So. Weezer also happened to be my first concert in 1995. And that is to say, all of those albums are the only albums you can compare Adrenaline to. Nothing else. Deftones released their debut album Adrenaline in the autumn of 1995. Before Chino, there was just singers. Before Chino, there wasn't too much screaming. Before Chino, there was just rap music. Of course, you had rap mixed with Biohazard and Aerosmith, and you had Faith No More and Living Colour and Red Hot Chili Peppers. Then there was Rage Against the Machine, which changed everything to become the biggest band on the planet. Without Rage, you've got no new metal success story, whether sound-wise or platform-wise. Zach, who was influenced by the Bad Brains, was rapping and screaming. Someone that also showed considerable music growth in that band was Tom Morello. Look at his previous band, Lock Up. So then along comes Chino. Now, before Chino, not many people were screaming, rapping and singing all at once. It's kind of half why we went nuts for Limp Bizkit, because Durst was able to do all three as well. Don't get me started on defining 90s cringe. Every generation has its cringe. Just look around. As for Limp Bizkit, we were more obsessed with how mental Wes Borland was. He was the reason we all loved that band. And just as Abe can be a massive reason for a lot of people to love Deftones, but R.I.P. Sam Rivers, 2025. Now, if you really want, you can compare Adrenaline to other 95 debut albums. I'll allow it, as this is a debut album. Therefore, it really should only be compared to other debut albums, especially in 95. You know, this video is essentially about musicians cooking different meals from similar ingredients. And albums should only be compared to the other albums from the same year, same ingredients, and same knowledge. Foo Fighters' debut Ray Gun album, Dave Grohl's debut album after Nirvana, was a big success, and it sounds nothing like recent Foo Fighters, again proving my point. Silverchair's Frog Stomp, a big debut album success in 95, influenced by Helmet. These 15-year-old rascals, I had to add them because they were literally me age-wise, and talking about their love of new metal in interviews, and go and compare their song No Association to My Own Summer. The second 1995 ends, you cannot compare Adrenaline to anything else. Nothing else existed, and it would be like inventing the iPhone in 1995, or comparing the first PlayStation to the PS5. Silly stuff. You can't compare it to the bands born out of it, like Loathe, and you can't compare it to Glassjaw or Cave In. You can't compare it to System of a Down or At the Drive-In. You can't compare it to Linkin Park or Taproot. And you can't compare it to Poison the Well or Hopesfall. You can only really compare it to Korn's debut album, or at its biggest generous stretch, Limp Bizkit's debut album, or the albums I mentioned prior to them. Thanks for joining my TED Talk. Sound off in the comments below. Adrenaline is a debut masterpiece, and for me it's Deftones' best album because nothing else in 1995 came close to it. Albums can only be compared to the past, not the future. That said, I'll see you tomorrow, or Saturday.